The gunshot that shattered Victoria Oakes's storefront window on that blistering August morning in 1878 would change her life forever, though not in the way anyone in Reno, Nevada might have expected. She dropped the bolt of calico fabric she had been measuring for Mrs. Henderson and Dove behind the counter, her heart hammering against her ribs as boots thundered past outside, and more shots rang out through the dusty street. When silence finally settled like ash after a wildfire, Victoria slowly rose to survey the damage to her modest dress shop, only to find her cash box missing from its place beneath the counter and the back door swinging wide open. The sheriff arrived within minutes, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the scene. "Looks like they hit 3 stores on this block, Miss Oakes. Got your money and Simpson's too. We will organize a posse within the hour." Victoria nodded numbly, her mind already calculating the loss. $230. Every cent she had saved over the past 6 months, money she needed to pay her suppliers in San Francisco and keep her little shop afloat. Her father had left her this building when he died of consumption 2 years ago, and she had poured everything she had into making it succeed. Now, in the span of seconds, months of careful work had been undone. "Did you see any of them?" Sheriff Morgan asked, his pencil poised over his notebook. "No, I was on the floor, but I heard them. 3 men, I think, maybe 4. Victoria's hands trembled as she picked up shards of glass from the windowsill. One of them laughed. A young laugh, Sheriff. These were not hardened outlaws. They sounded like boys playing at being dangerous. The sheriff grunted. "Boys or not, robbery is robbery. We will find them, Miss Oakes. You have my word." But as the days stretched into a week with no word of the thieves' capture, Victoria's hope dimmed. She sold her mother's pearl earrings and a gold locket to pay for the window repair, and scrounged together enough credit with her suppliers to keep a meager stock on hand. But the shadow of financial ruin loomed large. At 24 years old, she faced the very real possibility of losing everything her family had built. It was on a Saturday, 2 weeks after the robbery, that the young man appeared in her shop just as she was closing for the evening. Victoria looked up from sweeping the floor to find him standing in the doorway, hat in hands, his face pale beneath a shock of sandy brown hair. He could not have been more than 19 or 20, thin as a rail fence, with eyes that darted around the room like a cornered animal. "We are closed," Victoria said, gripping her broom handle tighter. Something about him set her nerves on edge. "I know, miss. I am sorry to bother you. I just needed to speak with you, privately if I may." His voice cracked slightly, and Victoria noticed his hands shaking. "If you need to place an order, you can return on Monday during business hours. It is not about an order, Miss Oakes." He swallowed hard and took a step inside, and Victoria instinctively stepped back. "My name is Tommy Walsh. I was one of the men who robbed your store 2 weeks ago." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to scream, to run, but something in the young man's posture stopped her. He looked utterly defeated, his shoulders hunched as though carrying an impossible weight. "You should leave," she managed to say, her voice steadier than she felt. "The sheriff's office is just down the street." "I know, miss, and I will go there next, I promise you that, but I needed to come here first." Tommy reached slowly into his jacket and Victoria tensed, but he only pulled out a worn leather pouch. "This is your money, all of it, every cent we took from you." He placed the pouch on the counter and stepped back, his eyes finally meeting hers. In them, Victoria saw genuine remorse, the kind that could not be feigned. "Why?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it. "Why steal it if you were only going to bring it back?" Tommy's face crumpled slightly. "It was not supposed to be like that. My brother Jake, He is the one who planned it all. Said it would be easy money, that we could make enough to get our mother proper medical care. She has been sick for months, Miss Oakes, coughing up blood and getting weaker every day. We tried everything honest, but no one in this town would give Jake work after he got into that fight at the saloon last year. I work at the livery stable, but it barely pays enough for food. So you turned to robbery. Victoria's voice was flat, but something in her chest was softening despite herself. She thought of her own father, how she would have done nearly anything to save him in those final terrible months. I know it was wrong. I have known it every minute since we did it. But Jake convinced me and our friend Billy that we had no choice. We hit your store and 2 others, then split up the money. But my mother, when I brought her to see the doctor with my share, she asked where I got the money. I could not lie to her, Miss Oakes. She looked at me with such disappointment in her eyes and told me she would rather die than live on stolen money. Tommy's voice broke. She made me promise to return every cent and turn myself in. So here I am. Victoria stared at the young man for a long moment, her mind whirling. Everything in her wanted to stay angry, to cling to the fear and violation she had felt. But looking at Tommy Walsh, she saw only a scared boy who had made a terrible mistake, not the hardened criminal she had imagined. Where are the others? Your brother and Billy? Tommy shook his head. I do not know about Billy. But Jake, he lit out for California the day after the robbery, said he was not waiting around to get caught. I have not heard from him since. And your mother, still sick, getting worse. Tommy's eyes were bright with unshed tears. But at least she can rest easier knowing I did the right thing, even if it is too late. Victoria picked up the leather pouch, feeling its weight in her hands. She opened it slowly and saw bills and coins inside, more than she had lost. This is too much. It is my share from all 3 stores. I do not know who else we hit or how to find them, but I figured the sheriff could sort that out. Tommy straightened slightly, as though some burden had lifted from his shoulders. I am ready to face the consequences, Miss Oakes. I just wanted you to know that I am sorry, truly sorry. What we did to you was wrong, and I will regret it for the rest of my days. Something shifted in Victoria's heart at that moment, something she would not fully understand until much later. She set down the pouch and studied Tommy Walsh's young face, seeing in him a reflection of her own younger brother who had died of scarlet fever at age 17. He had been reckless too, always making impulsive decisions that got him into trouble, but his heart had been good underneath it all. "Do you mean it?" she asked quietly. "About being sorry?" "Yes, madam, with every fiber of my being." Victoria took a deep breath. "Then I forgive you." The words hung in the air between them, and Tommy's eyes widened in shock. "Miss Oakes, I do not think you understand. I stole from you. I helped ruin your business. I understand perfectly well what you did, Mr. Walsh, but I also understand that you are here now, returning what you took and ready to face justice. That takes courage." She paused, her next words surprising even herself. "How old are you?" 19, miss." Old enough to know better, but young enough to change course. Young enough that a prison sentence will destroy any chance you have at a decent life. Victoria moved around the counter and stood directly in front of him. "I am not a wealthy woman, Tommy Walsh. What you took from me nearly destroyed everything I have worked for. But standing here now, I believe that sending you to prison will not make anything better. Your mother needs you. You need to be able to work and support her. Miss Oakes, I do not deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not. But I am giving it to you anyway." Victoria felt a strange sense of peace settling over her as she spoke. "On one condition. You find honest work, real work, and you help support your mother properly. And if you ever feel tempted to do something like this again, you remember this moment and remember that someone believed you were better than your worst decision. Tommy's face crumpled entirely then, and tears spilled down his cheeks. "Thank you, miss. Thank you. I swear to you I will never forget this. I will never let you down. See that you do not." Victoria's voice was firm but not unkind. "Now go home to your mother. Tell her the money has been returned. And tomorrow go find the sheriff and tell him everything. I will speak on your behalf if it comes to that." Tommy wiped his eyes roughly with his sleeve and nodded. He started to leave, then turned back. "Miss Oakes, you are the kindest person I have ever met. I hope someday I can be half as good as you." After he left, Victoria sank down onto the stool behind her counter, suddenly exhausted. What had she just done? She had forgiven a thief, possibly made herself look like a fool in front of the entire town. But as she clutched the returned money in her hands, she felt no regret, only a quiet certainty that she had made the right choice. She did not notice the man standing in the shadows across the street, watching her shop with keen interest. Bennett Zane had been in Reno for 3 days, and in that time, he had learned that Victoria Oakes ran the best dress shop in town, lived alone in the apartment above her store, and had a reputation for being honest and hardworking but standoffish. What no one had mentioned was that she had the kind of quiet beauty that struck a man like a lightning bolt. All dark curls and fierce eyes, and a stubborn set to her jaw that suggested she did not back down from much. Bennett had come to Reno to deliver a herd of horses to a buyer just outside of town, but he had stayed because something about the place felt right. He was 30 years old, had been riding the range since he was 15, and had seen more of the Western territories than most men saw in 2 lifetimes. He was tired of drifting, tired of sleeping under stars and eating dust with every meal. He wanted something more, though he had not quite figured out what that something was until he saw Victoria Oakes through her shop window, sweeping her floor with fierce determination despite the late hour. He had been standing there, working up the courage to go inside and introduce himself, when the young man had appeared. Bennett had watched the entire exchange through the window, had seen the pouch exchanged and witnessed Victoria's face transform from fear to compassion. He had been too far away to hear the words, but he did not need to. The body language told the story clearly enough. The boy had returned something, and Victoria had forgiven him. Bennett was still standing there, processing what he had witnessed, when Victoria finally snuffed out the lamps in her shop and locked the front door. She turned and nearly walked straight into him, gasping in surprise. "Forgive me, miss," Bennett said quickly, stepping back and removing his hat. "I did not mean to startle you." Victoria pressed a hand to her chest, her eyes wide. In the twilight, Bennett could see the wariness in her face, the exhaustion that came from constant vigilance. "Can I help you with something? My name is Bennett Zane. I am a horse rancher, or trying to be one anyway. I just delivered a herd to Mr. Patterson's place outside of town, and I have been looking for a reason to stay in Reno for a while." He realized he was rambling and forced himself to slow down. "I saw what happened just now, with that young man." Victoria's expression shuddered immediately. "Then you should know better than to lurk around in the shadows. Good evening, Mr. Zane." She tried to step around him, but Bennett moved to block her path, then immediately regretted it when he saw alarm flash across her face. He quickly stepped aside again. "I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten you. I only wanted to say that what you did in there, forgiving that boy, that was about the bravest thing I have seen in a long time." Victoria paused, her hand on the stairway railing that led to her apartment. "Brave or foolish? Brave," Bennett said firmly. "It takes no courage at all to seek revenge or hold a grudge, but to look someone who wronged you in the eye and offer forgiveness, that takes real strength." For the first time, Victoria's expression softened slightly. "You heard what we said. No, miss. I was too far away, but I saw enough to understand. Bennett turned his hat in his hands, suddenly feeling like an awkward schoolboy. Look, I know this is forward of me, but would you allow me to buy you supper tomorrow evening, as a gesture of respect, nothing more? I would very much like to know you better. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Bennett felt like he was being weighed and measured by those intelligent eyes. He was used to women finding him attractive enough. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was always a bit too long and eyes his mother had once called storm gray. But something about Victoria's scrutiny made him want to stand up straighter, to be better than he was. "Why?" she asked finally. "Because I have been drifting for 15 years, Miss Oakes, and I am tired of it. Because I watched you in that shop and saw something I did not even know I was looking for. Because you seem like someone worth knowing, and I would like the chance to prove I am worth knowing too." A small smile tugged at the corner of Victoria's mouth. "That is quite a speech, Mr. Zane. My mother always said I had a way with words when I was nervous." "I make you nervous?" Terrified, Bennett admitted, and was rewarded with a genuine laugh. "All right, Mr. Zane. You may buy me supper tomorrow evening, but I warn you I am not much for socializing. I will likely bore you to tears with talk of fabric and fashion." "I doubt that very much, Miss Oakes." Bennett felt a grin spreading across his face. "Shall I call for you at 7? 7 will be fine." As Bennett watched her climb the stairs to her apartment, he felt something shift in his chest, something he had not felt in years. Hope, maybe, or possibility. He turned and walked back toward the boarding house where he was staying, already planning what he would say the next evening, already wondering if Victoria Oakes might be the something more he had been searching for all this time. The next morning, Bennett woke with the sun and spent an hour cleaning up at the barber shop, getting his hair trimmed and his beard shaved down to presentable stubble. The barber, a talkative man named Chester, was full of information about the town and its residents. "You asking about Miss Oakes?" Chester said, stropping his razor with practiced efficiency. "Fine woman, that one. Keeps to herself mostly since her father passed. He owned that dress shop, you know, left it to her when the consumption took him. Some folks thought she should sell it and find herself a husband, but Victoria had other ideas. Built that business up from nothing, she did." "She seems like a determined woman," Bennett offered, trying to sound casual. "Determined is one word for it. Stubborn as a mule is another, though I would not say that to her face." Chester chuckled as he worked. "But she is honest and fair, treats folks with respect, more than can be said for some in this town." Bennett left the barber shop feeling freshly scrubbed and oddly nervous. He spent the afternoon checking on his horses at Patterson's ranch and negotiating a deal to stable them there for another week while he figured out his next move. Patterson, a grizzled old rancher who had been working this land for 30 years, studied him with shrewd eyes. "You thinking of settling around here, Zane? Maybe. The area seems to have potential, good grazing land, access to the railroad. A man could do worse. A man could also do better if he had a reason to stay put." Patterson's eyes twinkled. "I heard you have been asking about the Oakes girl." Bennett felt his ears heat up. "News travels fast in Reno. Small town, son. Folks notice things and they talk." Patterson leaned back in his chair. "But I will tell you this. Victoria Oakes is good people. Her father was a friend of mine. She has had a hard go of it since he passed, trying to keep that shop running and fending off every snake oil salesman and fortune hunter who thinks a woman alone must be desperate for a man." "I am not a fortune hunter," Bennett said firmly, "and I respect Miss Oakes enough to treat her properly." "Glad to hear it, because if you do not, you will have me and half this town to answer to. That girl has enough troubles without some drifter breaking her heart." The warning was clear, but Bennett took no offense. In fact, he respected Patterson more for it. A woman like Victoria deserved people looking out for her. He arrived at her shop at precisely 7 o'clock that evening, dressed in his cleanest shirt and carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers he had picked on the ride back from Patterson's ranch. Victoria opened the door dressed in a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. She looked beautiful and slightly uncomfortable, which made Bennett feel better about his own nervousness. "Mr. Zane, right on time. My mother raised me to be punctual." He held out the flowers. "These are for you. Nothing fancy, I am afraid, just some flowers I saw growing out by the creek." Victoria took them with a smile that seemed genuinely pleased. "They are lovely, thank you. Let me just put them in water and I will be ready." She disappeared up the stairs for a moment, and Bennett took the opportunity to look around the shop properly. It was small but well organized, with bolts of fabric arranged by color and pattern, a dress form in the corner displaying a partially finished dress, and a sewing machine that looked well used. Everything spoke of hard work and careful attention to detail. This was not a woman who took shortcuts or relied on charm to get by. Victoria Oakes earned everything she had. When she returned, they walked together to the restaurant, a modest establishment called the Silver Creek that served decent food and had a reputation for being respectable. The evening air was warm but pleasant, and Reno's main street was busy with people finishing their Saturday errands. As they walked, Bennett found himself acutely aware of Victoria beside him. She moved with purpose, her posture straight and confident despite her earlier claim to being uncomfortable with socializing. Several people nodded to her as they passed, and she returned the greetings politely but without stopping to chat. The restaurant was about half full when they arrived, and the owner, a matronly woman named Margaret, showed them to a table near the window with a knowing smile. "Good to see you out and about, Victoria dear, and with such a handsome escort too." Victoria's cheeks colored slightly, but she handled the teasing with grace. "Margaret, this is Mr. Bennett Zane. Bennett, Margaret Stevens owns this establishment. Pleasure to meet you, madam." "Oh, a polite one too. You keep this one, Victoria." Margaret winked and bustled off to get their menus, leaving Bennett and Victoria alone in slightly awkward silence. "She means well," Victoria said finally, "but the whole town has been trying to marry me off since my father died. I think they view me as some kind of charity case." "You do not strike me as someone who needs charity." "I do not need it, and I do not want it. I am perfectly capable of taking care of myself." There was a defensive edge to her voice that told Bennett this was a sore subject. "I do not doubt that for a second," he said carefully. "But there is a difference between needing help and accepting companionship. One is about survival. The other is about living." Victoria looked at him sharply, as though trying to determine if he was mocking her. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied her because she relaxed slightly. "That is a philosophical observation from a horse rancher. You would be surprised how philosophical a man can get when he spends most of his time alone with horses and sky." Bennett smiled. "They are not much for conversation, but they are good listeners." That earned him a genuine laugh, and the tension between them eased. They ordered their food, and as they ate, Bennett found himself telling Victoria about his life on the range, about the places he had seen and the things he had learned. He told her about growing up in Texas, about losing his parents to typhoid when he was 15, and striking out on his own with nothing but a horse and a bedroll. He told her about the years he spent working cattle drives, about the time he nearly died of a rattlesnake bite in Arizona, about the sunset he watched in Colorado that was so beautiful it made him believe in something bigger than himself. Victoria listened with genuine interest, asking questions and offering observations that showed she was really paying attention. In turn, she told him about her own life, about growing up in Reno when it was barely more than a settlement, about learning the dressmaking trade from her mother before a winter fever took her when Victoria was 12. She told him about her father, about how he had encouraged her to take over the shop, even though most people thought it was not proper for a young woman to run a business alone. "He believed I could do anything I set my mind to," Victoria said, her voice soft with memory. "Even when I doubted myself, he never did. I think that is why losing him was so hard. He was not just my father, he was my biggest champion. He sounds like he was a good man. The best." Victoria looked down at her plate, then back up at Bennett. "That is why what happened with Tommy Walsh hit me so hard. Not just the money, though that was terrible enough, but the violation of it. Someone broke into the safe place my father built for me. For a while I was so angry I could not see straight. What changed?" I saw Tommy's face. Victoria's expression grew thoughtful. "I saw how young he was, how scared, and I realized that holding onto my anger was not going to change what happened. It was only going to make me bitter and small. I did not want to become that person." Bennett reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "That takes remarkable courage, Victoria. Most people would not be able to do what you did." She did not pull her hand away, and Bennett felt a warmth spread through his chest at that small connection. "I do not feel courageous. I feel confused, if I am being honest. Part of me still thinks I should have marched Tommy straight to the sheriff. Part of me wonders if I did the right thing at all." "You did," Bennett said firmly. "I know we have only just met, but I feel certain of that. You gave that boy a chance to be better than his worst moment. That is a rare gift." They talked through dessert and coffee, the conversation flowing easily between them. Bennett found himself sharing things he had never told anyone, thoughts and dreams he usually kept locked away. There was something about Victoria that made him want to be honest, to show her who he really was beneath the dusty cowboy exterior. When they finally left the restaurant, the sun had long since set, and stars were scattered across the Nevada sky like diamond dust. Bennett walked Victoria back to her shop, both of them moving slower than necessary, reluctant for the evening to end. At her door, Victoria turned to face him. "Thank you for supper, Bennett. I enjoyed myself more than I expected to." "Is that your way of saying you will let me take you out again?" Bennett smiled, but his heart was beating faster than it should have been. "That is my way of saying I would like that very much." Victoria's own smile was shy but genuine. "Though I should warn you, I am not very good at this." "At what? This? Whatever this is." "I have not had much practice with courting or romance or whatever you want to call it. I have been too busy keeping my business afloat." Bennett took a step closer, near enough that he could smell the faint scent of lavender that seemed to cling to her. "Then we will figure it out together. I am not exactly an expert myself, but I know I want to see you again, Victoria, and again after that if you will let me." "I would like that." Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. For a moment, Bennett thought about kissing her, about closing the small distance between them and seeing if her lips were as soft as they looked. But something held him back. This was too important to rush, too precious to risk spoiling with hasty actions. Instead, he took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Good night, Victoria." "Good night, Bennett." He walked back to his boarding house in a daze, already counting the hours until he could see her again. Over the following weeks, Bennett found excuses to stay in Reno. He took a job helping Patterson with his horses, mending fences and breaking in some of the younger animals. The work was familiar and satisfying, and it gave him a reason to remain near Victoria while their courtship unfolded. They fell into a comfortable rhythm. Bennett would stop by the dress shop most afternoons, sometimes with an excuse like needing a button sewn or a shirt mended, other times with no excuse at all except wanting to see her face. Victoria would smile when he appeared, setting aside whatever she was working on to make him coffee and chat for a few minutes. On Sundays, when the shop was closed, they would go for walks along the Truckee River or have picnics in the shade of the cottonwood trees that grew along its banks. Slowly, carefully, they learned each other. Bennett discovered that Victoria had a sharp sense of humor that she only showed when she felt comfortable, that she could quote Shakespeare from memory, because her father used to read to her every evening, that she was terrified of spiders but would not kill them because she thought every creature deserved to live. Victoria learned that Bennett could play the harmonica surprisingly well, that he had a gift for gentling even the most stubborn horses, that he carried a photograph of his parents in his pocket and looked at it when he was feeling lost. The town noticed, of course. In a place like Reno, two people courting might as well have been front-page news. Margaret at the restaurant took to keeping their favorite table reserved. The barber offered Bennett free trims whenever he came in. Even Sheriff Morgan, who had initially been suspicious of Bennett's intentions, gave him a grudging nod of approval when they passed on the street. But not everyone was pleased with the developing romance. Simon Caldwell, who owned the general store and had been making unwelcome advances toward Victoria for months, took to glaring at Bennett whenever they crossed paths. One afternoon, he cornered Bennett outside the saloon. "You think you are clever, Zane." Coming into town and sweeping Victoria off her feet, Bennett kept his voice level. "I think I am a man who cares about a woman, nothing clever about it. Victoria needs a stable man, someone with roots in this community, not some drifter who will leave her high and dry when he gets bored." Caldwell's face was flushed with anger and perhaps too much whiskey. "You are right that Victoria deserves stability," Bennett agreed. "That is why I bought the Morrison place last week, 500 acres just outside of town. I am starting a horse ranch there, building it into something permanent." The news clearly caught Caldwell off guard. "You bought land?" "Here, I did, because I am not planning on going anywhere. I found something worth staying for." Bennett met Caldwell's eyes steadily. "And if you care about Victoria at all, you will respect her choices and leave her be. She has made it clear she is not interested in your attentions, and continuing to press her is not the behavior of a gentleman." Caldwell sputtered for a moment, then stormed off without another word. Bennett watched him go, hoping that would be the end of it, but suspecting it would not be quite that simple. He told Victoria about the land that evening as they sat on the bench outside her shop, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "You bought the Morrison place." Victoria's eyes were wide with surprise. "Bennett, that is a serious commitment, I know. But I am serious about staying here, Victoria, about building a life in Reno." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "About building a life with you if you will have me." Victoria was quiet for a long moment and Bennett's heart sank. Had he moved too fast, assumed too much? "Bennett, I need to tell you something." Her voice was soft but serious. "The reason I have been so careful about getting involved with anyone, about letting myself feel this way about you, is because I am afraid. My father's death nearly destroyed me. The thought of loving someone again, of opening myself up to that kind of loss, terrifies me." Bennett squeezed her hand gently. "I understand. Believe me, I do. I have been running for 15 years because I was afraid of exactly what I am feeling right now. But Victoria, I have learned something in all that running. Life is going to hurt us whether we let people in or not. At least if we choose to love, we get something beautiful to balance out the pain." "When did you become so wise?" Victoria's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "About 2 seconds ago." Bennett smiled. "I am making this up as I go along, same as you, but I meant what I said. I am all in, Victoria. However long this takes, whatever you need from me, I am here." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge. Bennett felt a peace settle over him that he had not known since before his parents died. This was what home felt like. Not a place, but a person. A feeling. A choice to stop running and start building. The next morning, Bennett was at his new property, surveying the land and making plans for the barn he would need to build, when a rider approached at a gallop. It was Tommy Walsh, the young man who had robbed Victoria's store weeks ago. Bennett had heard through town gossip that Tommy had turned himself in as promised, but that Victoria had spoken on his behalf to the sheriff. In light of Tommy's voluntary return of the money and genuine remorse, the sheriff had sentenced him to 6 months of community service rather than jail time. He was required to work without pay for various businesses in town, learning honest trade and making restitution for his crime. "Mr. Zane." Tommy called out, slightly breathless. "I am sorry to bother you, sir, but there is trouble in town. Miss Oakes sent me to fetch you." Bennett was already moving toward his horse before Tommy finished speaking. "What kind of trouble?" "It is Caldwell from the general store. He is over at the dress shop now, causing a scene, saying terrible things about Miss Oakes, about you too. Sheriff Morgan is out of town for the day, and Miss Oakes did not want to make things worse by calling for help from anyone else. But I thought you should know." Bennett swung into his saddle, his jaw tight. "You did right, Tommy. Thank you." They rode hard back to town, and Bennett could hear Caldwell's voice echoing down the street before they even reached the shop. A small crowd had gathered, and through the open door, Bennett could see Caldwell standing in the middle of Victoria's store, his face red and his voice raised. "You think you are too good for me. Too good for a man who has been part of this community for 20 years. But you will spread your legs for some saddle tramp who blows into town with empty pockets and sweet words." Bennett was through the door before he consciously decided to move, putting himself between Caldwell and Victoria. "That is enough." Caldwell turned his bleary eyes on Bennett. "Oh, here comes the hero. Tell me, Zane, what did you promise her? Marriage, a future. How long before you get what you want and move on to the next town?" "I said that is enough." Bennett's voice was low and dangerous. "You will apologize to Miss Oakes and then you will leave. Now. Or what? You will fight me. You will prove you are just another violent drifter." Caldwell laughed bitterly. "Go ahead. Hit me. Show everyone what you really are." Bennett wanted to. Every muscle in his body was tensed with the desire to plant his fist in Caldwell's sneering face. But he caught Victoria's eye over Caldwell's shoulder and saw the plea there. She did not want violence. She wanted this to end peacefully. With enormous effort, Bennett unclenched his fists and forced his voice to remain calm. "No, Caldwell, I am not going to hit you. But I am going to tell you some hard truths, and you are going to listen. You think you love Victoria, but you do not. If you did, you would want her to be happy, even if that happiness did not include you. Instead, you are here insulting her and trying to intimidate her because she had the audacity to make her own choices." Caldwell opened his mouth, but Bennett continued, his voice growing stronger. "Victoria Oakes is the finest woman I have ever met. She is smart and kind and brave enough to forgive a man who wronged her. She built a business from nothing and kept it running through circumstances that would have broken lesser people. She deserves respect, and she deserves someone who sees her worth. You clearly do not, so get out of her store and do not come back." For a moment, it seemed like Caldwell might argue further. But something in Bennett's stance, or perhaps the murmur of agreement from the crowd that had gathered in the doorway, made him deflate. He looked around at the faces watching him, saw the disapproval there, and seemed to realize how badly he had misjudged the situation. "Fine," he muttered, pushing past Bennett toward the door. "You deserve each other." As Caldwell left, the crowd slowly dispersed, though several women stopped to check on Victoria and offer their support. Bennett stayed back, letting her handle the social necessities, but he did not leave. When the last person had gone and Victoria finally closed the door, he saw her shoulders begin to shake. He was across the room in 3 strides, pulling her into his arms. "It is all right. He is gone. You are safe." "I am not crying because I am scared," Victoria said, her voice muffled against his chest. "I am crying because I am so angry. How dare he speak to me like that? How dare he make assumptions about my life and my choices? You have every right to be angry." Bennett held her tighter. "He had no call to say those things. And you—" Victoria pulled back enough to look up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tears. "You did not hit him. You could have, and honestly, part of me wanted you to, but you did not. You stayed calm and you spoke the truth, and you gave him a chance to leave with some dignity intact." "I learned from the best," Bennett said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You showed me what real strength looks like when you forgave Tommy Walsh." "I was just trying to live up to your example." Victoria kissed him then, rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his with an urgency that took his breath away. Bennett responded instinctively, one hand cupping her face while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss was everything he had imagined and more, sweet and fierce and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victoria rested her forehead against his. "I love you, Bennett Zane. I know it is fast and probably crazy, but I do not care. I love you." "I love you too, Victoria Oakes. Have from the moment I saw you forgive that boy." Bennett smiled, his heart feeling too big for his chest. "So what do we do now?" "Now." Victoria's smile was radiant. "Now we build that future you talked about together." The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Bennett threw himself into building his ranch, hiring a crew to help raise a barn and corral, purchasing breeding stock and planning for the future. Victoria helped with the finances, her sharp mind for business proving invaluable as they calculated costs and projected income. In the evenings, they would sit together on the front porch of the cabin Bennett was living in temporarily, making plans and dreaming about the life they would build. Tommy Walsh became a regular presence at the ranch, having proven himself a hard worker during his community service. Bennett hired him on part-time, teaching him about horses and giving him honest work. The young man had kept his promise to Victoria and to his mother, staying out of trouble and working hard to rebuild his reputation. His mother's health had even improved slightly, enough that she could come to town once in a while, and always made a point to thank Victoria for giving her son a second chance. 3 months after their first dinner together, on a crisp October evening with the aspens turning gold in the surrounding hills, Bennett took Victoria out to the ranch to see the completed barn. He had worked extra hours to get it finished in time, wanting everything to be perfect. "It is beautiful, Bennett," Victoria said, walking through the structure and admiring the craftsmanship. "You should be proud of what you have built here." "We have built," Bennett corrected, taking her hand. "None of this would have been possible without you, Victoria. Your business sense, your support, your belief in me. You made this dream real." He led her to the hayloft where he had spread blankets and pillows, creating a comfortable nest overlooking the setting sun. Victoria laughed in delight at the romantic gesture. "When did you have time to do this?" "I have my ways." Bennett helped her up the ladder and they settled into the blankets, Victoria leaning back against his chest as they watched the sun paint the sky in brilliant colors. "Victoria," Bennett said after a few moments of comfortable silence, "I know we have not been courting long by traditional standards, but I am 30 years old, and I have seen enough of life to know what I want. I want you. I want mornings waking up beside you and evenings planning our future together. I want to build this ranch with you, raise horses and children and maybe a few chickens. I want to grow old watching sunsets from this hayloft." He shifted, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a ring. It was simple silver with a small sapphire, nothing fancy but chosen with care. "Victoria Oakes, will you marry me?" Victoria turned in his arms, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes, yes, of course I will marry you." Bennett slipped the ring onto her finger and they kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, sealing their promise to each other. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was laughing and crying at the same time. "My father would have loved you," she said softly. "He always said I should find a man who was not afraid of my strength, who would stand beside me instead of in front of me. You are that man, Bennett." "I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you," Bennett promised. They were married 6 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Reno. Margaret from the restaurant helped Victoria with her dress, a beautiful creation of cream-colored silk that Victoria had sewn herself in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Patterson stood as Bennett's best man, and Tommy Walsh served as an usher, his mother watching proudly from the front pew. The whole town turned out for the celebration that followed, a party at the restaurant with music and dancing and enough food to feed twice the number of guests. Even Sheriff Morgan made a rare appearance, offering his congratulations and admitting to Bennett that he was glad to have been proven wrong about him. As Bennett danced with his new wife under lanterns strung across the restaurant's back garden, he marveled at how completely his life had changed. 6 months ago, he had been a drifter with no home and no prospects. Now he had a wife, a ranch, a future that stretched out bright and promising. And it had all started with witnessing an act of forgiveness, with seeing Victoria's generous heart and knowing he wanted to spend his life earning a place beside it. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, smiling up at him. "How lucky I am. How one moment can change everything. If I had not been standing on that street corner that night, if I had not seen you forgive Tommy Walsh, none of this would have happened." "I think you are wrong," Victoria said thoughtfully. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be. You might be right." Bennett twirled her, making her laugh. "But I am glad it happened the way it did. I am glad I got to see your heart before anything else. It made me want to be worthy of it." "You are worthy of it, Bennett. You gave me your own heart in return, and that is all I ever wanted." They danced until the stars came out, surrounded by friends and well-wishers, beginning their married life with joy and hope and the promise of tomorrow. The first year of marriage brought challenges neither of them had fully anticipated. The ranch required constant work, and there were lean times when money was tight and the future felt uncertain. Victoria kept her dress shop open, working long hours to ensure they had steady income while Bennett built up the horse breeding program. They learned to navigate each other's moods and habits, to compromise and communicate and choose each other, even when it was difficult. But they also discovered joy in the everyday moments. Morning coffee shared on the porch before the workday began. Evenings spent reading together by lamplight, Victoria sewing while Bennett mended tack. Stolen kisses in the barn when they were supposed to be working. The quiet satisfaction of building something together, brick by brick, day by day. Tommy Walsh became almost like a younger brother to them both, living in a small room in the barn and working full-time at the ranch. His mother's health stabilized, and she took in sewing work from Victoria, creating a web of mutual support and care. Tommy proved to have a natural gift with horses, gentle and patient in a way that made even the most skittish animals trust him. One evening in their second spring together, as Victoria and Bennett sat on the porch watching the sunset, Victoria took his hand and placed it on her belly. "We are going to have a baby," she said softly. Bennett's eyes widened, his face cycling through shock, joy, and wonder in rapid succession. "Truly, you are certain?" The doctor confirmed it yesterday. "I wanted to wait to tell you until I was sure." Victoria smiled at his expression. "You are going to be a father, Bennett." Bennett pulled her into his arms, holding her as carefully as if she were made of glass. "A father. I am going to be a father." He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes bright with tears. "Victoria, I promise you, I am going to be the best father I can be. I am going to give our child everything I wish my parents had lived to give me." "I know you will," Victoria said, kissing him softly. "You are already the best man I know." The pregnancy was not easy. Victoria struggled with sickness in the early months and exhaustion throughout. Bennett hovered anxiously, trying to help with the shop while still managing the ranch, running himself ragged trying to do everything at once. Finally, Margaret and several other women in town staged what they called an intervention, insisting that Victoria hire help for the shop and rest more. "You are going to wear yourself out, dear," Margaret said firmly. "And Bennett is going to give himself an apoplexy trying to take care of you. Accept help when it is offered." Grudgingly, Victoria agreed, hiring a young woman named Sarah to help with the shop. It was hard for her to let go of control, to trust someone else with the business she had built. But Sarah proved capable and eager to learn, and Victoria found that having help gave her more time to rest and prepare for the baby. On a cold November evening, as the first snow of the season began to fall, Victoria went into labor. Bennett was in the barn when Tommy came running to fetch him, and he dropped everything to race to the house. The doctor had already been summoned, and Margaret and 2 other women from town were there to help. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. Bennett paced in the next room, listening to Victoria's cries and feeling utterly helpless. At one point she called for him, and he went to her despite Margaret's protests. "I am here," he said, taking her hand as another contraction hit. "I am right here, Victoria." "Do not leave me," she gasped, her face pale and sweaty. "Promise you will not leave. Never. I will never leave you." Bennett stayed by her side through the rest of the labor, holding her hand and murmuring encouragement even as his heart broke at seeing her in such pain. Finally, as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, a baby's cry filled the room. The doctor smiled as he held up a squirming, red-faced infant. "You have a son, Mr. and Mrs. Zane, a healthy baby boy." Bennett watched through tears as they cleaned and wrapped the baby, then placed him in Victoria's arms. She looked exhausted but radiant, gazing down at their son with a love so fierce it took Bennett's breath away. "He is perfect," Victoria whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Bennett leaned down to kiss her forehead, then looked at his son properly for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and impossibly tiny fingers that curled around Bennett's when he offered them. In that moment, Bennett understood what it meant to have your heart living outside your body. "What should we name him?" Victoria asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never quite settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Bennett knew exactly what felt right. "James," he said. "After your father, James Nathaniel Zane." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "James." "Yes, that is perfect. My father would be so honored." The next few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless feedings, of learning how to care for a tiny human who seemed determined to never sleep for more than 2 hours at a stretch. Bennett had handled countless foals in his life, but nothing had prepared him for the all-consuming nature of fatherhood. Yet through the exhaustion and the uncertainty, he felt a joy deeper than anything he had known. Victoria proved to be a natural mother, intuitive and patient even when she was running on no sleep and covered in spit-up. Bennett watched her with awe, falling in love with her all over again as he saw her tenderness with their son. "You are staring at me again," Victoria said one evening as she nursed James by lamplight. "I cannot help it. You are beautiful. I am a mess. I have not washed my hair in 3 days and I am wearing the same dress I wore yesterday because it is the only one that is not covered in baby spit." "Still beautiful," Bennett insisted, coming to sit beside her. "The most beautiful sight I have ever seen." James finished nursing and Victoria handed him to Bennett to burp. As Bennett held his son against his shoulder, gently patting his back, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. All the years of drifting, of searching for something he could not name. And then one night in Reno, watching through a window as a woman forgave a thief, he had found it. "Found her, found home. What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, echoing the question she had asked on their wedding night. "Just how perfect this is. How right. How grateful I am that I was on that street corner the night Tommy came to return your money." "I am grateful too," Victoria said softly. "You saw the best in me that night, Bennett. You saw me try to do something good and you did not let it go unnoticed. I think that is when I started to love you, even though I did not realize it yet." "I gave you my heart that night," Bennett said. "I just needed some time to figure out how to tell you." James let out a loud burp, making them both laugh. The baby was growing fast, becoming more alert and interactive each day. He had Victoria's dark eyes and Bennett's stubborn chin, and Bennett could already tell he was going to be a handful. As James grew into a toddler, the ranch continued to expand. Bennett's reputation for breeding quality horses spread, and buyers came from as far as California to purchase his stock. Victoria eventually sold the dress shop to Sarah, who had proven herself more than capable of running it. The decision was not easy, but Victoria found that she preferred being at the ranch full-time, managing the business side of the horse operation and raising James. Tommy Walsh had saved enough money to buy a small piece of land adjacent to the ranch, where he was starting his own modest horse breeding program with Bennett's help and advice. His mother had passed peacefully in her sleep the previous winter, her final words to Tommy a blessing and an admonition to stay on the honest path he had chosen. Tommy mourned her deeply, but took comfort in knowing she had died proud of the man he had become. One afternoon when James was 3 years old, Victoria found Bennett in the barn, working with a particularly stubborn yearling. She watched him for a moment, admiring the patience and skill he brought to the work. He spoke to the horse in low, soothing tones, never forcing, always encouraging. "You are good at this," she said, making her presence known. Bennett looked up and smiled. "I have had a lot of practice. What brings you out here? James is supposed to be napping." "He is. I left Margaret watching him. She stopped by with a pie." Victoria came to lean against the corral fence. "I actually came out here because I have some news." Something in her tone made Bennett give her his full attention. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news. Very good news." Victoria's smile was radiant. "We are going to have another baby." Bennett whooped with joy, startling the yearling, then vaulted over the fence to sweep Victoria into his arms. "Another baby. Truly, truly. The doctor says I am about 3 months along. We should have a new baby by early autumn." They stood there in the dusty barn, holding each other and laughing, already imagining their family growing. This pregnancy was easier than the first, Victoria having learned what to expect and how to manage the discomfort. When their daughter was born the following September, she came quickly, arriving so fast that the doctor almost did not make it in time. "A girl," Bennett said wonderingly, holding his tiny daughter in his large, calloused hands. "We have a daughter, Victoria. She is beautiful. Look at all that blonde hair." Victoria reached up to touch the baby's downy head. "I think she has your nose." "Poor thing," Bennett joked, then grew serious. "What should we name her?" "I was thinking Catherine, after your mother." Bennett's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that?" "Your mother gave me the most wonderful man I have ever known. It seems right to honor her." Victoria touched his face gently. "What do you think?" "I think it is perfect. Catherine Elizabeth Zane. Hello, little Kathy." Their daughter was a sunny, easy baby, so different from James that it was hard to believe they came from the same parents. Where James had been fussy and demanding, Kathy was content to lie in her cradle and observe the world with wide, curious eyes. James was fascinated by his little sister, always wanting to hold her and help care for her, showing a gentleness that made both Bennett and Victoria proud. The years flowed by, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. There were hard times, including a drought that nearly ruined them and a winter storm that killed several of their best horses. But there were good times too, like the year Bennett's horses won prizes at the state fair, or the Christmas when James received his first pony and rode circles around the house, until Victoria made him stop for fear he would make himself sick. Tommy Walsh eventually married a school teacher who came to Reno from St. Louis, and they built a life on his small ranch, raising horses and eventually 3 children of their own. He never forgot what Victoria and Bennett had done for him, and he made sure his children knew the story, teaching them the value of second chances and the power of forgiveness. When James turned 15, he started helping Bennett with the horse training full-time, showing an instinct for the work that suggested he had inherited his father's gift. Kathy was different, dreaming of becoming a teacher and devouring every book she could get her hands on. Bennett and Victoria supported both their children's ambitions, proud of the individuals they were becoming. One evening in late summer, with James and Kathy both grown and pursuing their own dreams, Victoria and Bennett sat on the porch they had sat on countless times before, watching the sun set over the land they had built together. "You remember the night we met?" Victoria asked, her head resting on Bennett's shoulder. "Every detail. I was standing across the street from your shop trying to work up the courage to come introduce myself, and then Tommy Walsh showed up, and you saw me forgive him. And I fell in love with you," Bennett said simply. "Right then and there, even though I did not fully understand it yet. I saw your heart, Victoria, and I knew I wanted to spend my life worthy of it." "You have been more than worthy," Victoria said, lifting her head to look at him. "You gave me your heart in return, Bennett. You gave me a life I never dreamed I could have. A real partnership, built on love and respect and trust. You gave me our children and this beautiful ranch, and 30 years of the kind of happiness I did not know existed." Bennett took her hand, the same hand that had worn his ring for 3 decades, and raised it to his lips. "It has been my honor and my privilege, Victoria Zane, every single day." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss and their wedding vows and countless moments of joy and sorrow throughout their years together. The ranch was quiet around them, the horses settled for the night, the work done for another day. In the distance, they could see lights from Tommy's ranch, and beyond that, the glow of Reno, which had grown considerably since they first met. But here, on their porch, time seemed to stand still. Here, it was just the two of them and the life they had built from nothing but love and determination and the courage to forgive. "Thank you," Victoria said softly. For what? For being brave enough to approach me that night. For seeing something in me worth pursuing. For building this life with me. I should be thanking you, Bennett countered. You took a chance on a drifter with nothing to offer but promises and dreams. You believed in me when I barely believed in myself. We believed in each other, Victoria said. That is what made it work. That is what made it all possible. Bennett pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his chest. She was older now, lines creasing her face and silver threading through her dark hair, but to him, she was still the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Still the woman who had shown him what real strength looked like by forgiving a thief who did not deserve it. Still the woman whose generous heart had captured his completely. I love you, Victoria, today and tomorrow and every day after that. I love you too, Bennett, always. They stayed on the porch until the moon rose full and bright, casting silver light over the land they had claimed and cultivated and called home. Inside the house, photo albums documented their life together, their wedding day, the birth of their children, countless holidays and ordinary moments that had somehow added up to an extraordinary life. Later, as they prepared for bed, moving through the familiar routine they had shared for decades, Victoria paused to look out the window at the barn where it had all begun, where Bennett had proposed in the hayloft so many years ago. Do you ever wonder how different our lives would be if Tommy Walsh had never come to return that money? She asked. Bennett came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Sometimes. But then, I remember that I was already looking for a reason to stay in Reno. I think I would have found my way to you eventually, one way or another. You think so, I know so. Some things are just meant to be. Victoria smiled, remembering that she had said nearly the same thing on their wedding night. Maybe it was true. Maybe their love had been written in the stars, inevitable and inescapable. Or maybe it was simply the result of two people choosing each other, day after day, year after year, through good times and bad. In the end, it did not matter. What mattered was that they had found each other, had built a life together that was richer and fuller than either could have imagined. What mattered was the love that had started with an act of forgiveness and grown into something strong enough to weather any storm. As they climbed into bed that night, Bennett pulled Victoria close, and she settled against him with the ease of long practice. Outside, the Nevada night was quiet except for the whisper of wind through the grass and the occasional nicker from the horses in the barn. Inside, two hearts beat in synchrony, two lives intertwined so completely that it was impossible to imagine them apart. "Good night, my love," Bennett whispered into the darkness. "Good night," Victoria whispered back. And in the morning, they would wake and do it all again, choosing each other with the same certainty they had chosen each other every day for the past 3 decades. Because that was what love was in the end. Not just a feeling or a moment, but a choice made over and over again. The choice to forgive, to believe, to keep giving your heart even when it was frightening. The choice to build something beautiful from nothing but faith and hope and the courage to try. Victoria had forgiven a man who stole from her, and in doing so, she had shown Bennett Zane what real strength looked like. He had witnessed her heart in that moment and known he wanted to give her his own. And she had taken it, had treasured it, had given him hers in return. Together, they had built a life that honored that exchange, a love story that would be told by their children and grandchildren for generations to come. The story of how forgiveness had opened a door, how compassion had built a bridge, how two hearts had found each other in the wild and wonderful landscape of the American West. And if you asked either of them decades later what the secret to their happiness was, they would both give you the same answer. They had chosen to see the best in each other, to believe in possibility, and to never stop choosing love, no matter how hard things got. That was the foundation on which everything else was built. That was the promise they had kept day after day, year after year, until the very end. The ranch continued to thrive as James took over more of the daily operations, bringing his own innovations while respecting the foundation his father had built. Kathy became a teacher in Reno, just as she had dreamed, and married a kind veterinarian who shared her love of learning and animals. She gave Victoria and Bennett their first grandchildren, twin boys who inherited their grandfather's way with horses and their grandmother's sharp minds. When Victoria and Bennett celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole town turned out for the celebration. They held it at the ranch, under the stars, with music and dancing and enough food to feed everyone twice over. Tommy Walsh gave a speech about second chances and the power of forgiveness, his voice breaking as he talked about how Victoria's compassion had changed the entire trajectory of his life. If Miss Victoria had not forgiven me that day, if she had sent me to prison like she had every right to do, I would not be standing here today, Tommy said, his wife and children beside him. I would not have this beautiful family, this life I have built. I owe everything to her kindness and to Mr. Bennett's willingness to give me honest work and teach me a trade. They showed me that our worst moments do not have to define us, that we can choose to become better. As Victoria listened to Tommy's words, tears streaming down her face, she thought about that long-ago night when a scared boy had appeared in her shop with a leather pouch full of stolen money. She had made a choice in that moment, a choice to believe in redemption rather than retribution. And looking around at the life that choice had led to, at Bennett beside her and their children and grandchildren surrounding them, at Tommy and his family and all the other lives they had touched along the way, she knew she had made the right decision. "You changed my life that night," Bennett whispered in her ear as Tommy finished his speech. "You showed me what love really looks like. Not just romantic love, but the kind of love that sees people's potential and helps them reach it. The kind of love that builds community and family and legacy." "We changed each other's lives," Victoria corrected. "That is what love does, Bennett. It transforms us." They danced under the stars that night, just as they had at their wedding, surrounded by the people who had become their extended family. The night was warm and clear, the sky brilliant with stars, and Victoria felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness looked like, she thought. Not perfection, but something better. A life well lived, a love deeply felt, a legacy of kindness and compassion that would ripple out long after she and Bennett were gone. As they grew older, Victoria and Bennett began to slow down, handing more responsibilities to James and spending more time with their grandchildren. They took long walks around the ranch, remembering the early days when it was just wilderness and possibility. They sat on their porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sunsets, content in the companionable silence that comes from decades of partnership. When Victoria fell ill the winter she turned 68, Bennett barely left her side. The doctor said it was pneumonia, that at her age it was serious but not necessarily fatal if she rested and took care of herself. Bennett made sure she did exactly that, bringing her soup and tea, reading to her for hours, adjusting her pillows and keeping the fire stoked so she was never cold. "You are hovering again," Victoria said, her voice weak but amused. "I am not hovering. I am being attentive. There is a difference. Bennett Zane, I have been taking care of myself for 68 years. I think I can manage a little pneumonia. Not on my watch, you cannot." Bennett settled into the chair beside her bed, taking her hand. "You are stuck with me, Victoria. In sickness and in health, remember, How could I forget? Victoria squeezed his hand gently. You remind me every day. And I will keep reminding you every day for the next 40 years, if I have my way. Victoria did recover, slowly regaining her strength through the spring and summer. By autumn, she was back to her old self, fussing over the grandchildren and helping James plan improvements to the ranch. Bennett watched her with gratitude and relief, aware of how close he had come to losing her, and determined to cherish every moment they had left. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a smaller gathering, just family and close friends. Their children and grandchildren had commissioned a painting of the ranch as a gift, capturing the barn and house and corrals in loving detail. Victoria cried when they unveiled it, overwhelmed by the beauty of the life they had built being immortalized in art. 50 years, Bennett marveled that night as they prepared for bed. Half a century together, Victoria, and I love you more today than I did on our wedding day. Only because you know me better now, Victoria teased, all my flaws and quirks and stubborn ways. Especially because of those things. Bennett helped her into bed, then climbed in beside her. Loving you has been the greatest adventure of my life, Victoria, better than any trail I rode or territory I explored. You are my home, my North Star, my everything. Victoria curled against him, fitting perfectly into the space she had occupied for 50 years. And you are mine. My partner, my love, my best friend. I cannot imagine my life without you in it, Bennett. I do not want to. Then we will just have to live forever, Bennett said, only half joking. But of course, forever was not an option. As they moved into their 70s, time began to weigh more heavily on them both. Bennett's hands grew stiff with arthritis, making it harder for him to work with the horses. Victoria's eyesight dimmed, forcing her to give up the detailed needlework she loved. They moved more slowly, tired more easily, spent more time resting than doing. But through it all, their love remained constant. If anything, it deepened, became more essential. They had become so intertwined over the decades that it was difficult to tell where one ended and the other began. They finished each other's sentences, knew each other's moods with a glance, moved through their days with a synchronicity that came from a lifetime of partnership. James and Kathy both worried about them, about what would happen when one of them was gone and the other was left alone. But Victoria and Bennett refused to dwell on such thoughts. They focused on the present, on the gift of each day together, on the love that had sustained them for more than half a century. On a warm spring morning, as they sat together on their porch watching the sun rise over the ranch, Bennett turned to Victoria with a smile. Do you remember the first sunrise we watched together? The morning after I proposed? I remember everything, Bennett. Every sunrise, every sunset, every ordinary moment in between. They are all precious to me. Me too. Bennett took her hand, his touch familiar and dear. If I could go back and do it all again, I would not change a single thing, Victoria. Not one moment. Every joy and every sorrow led us here to this perfect morning together. Together, Victoria echoed, leaning her head on his shoulder. That is all I ever wanted. To face life together, with you by my side. They sat in silence as the sun climbed higher, painting the land in shades of gold and green. The ranch was waking up around them, horses nickering in the corrals, birds singing in the trees, the sounds of James and his family beginning their day. Life continuing as it always did, in endless cycles of renewal and growth. But for Victoria and Bennett, time seemed to pause in that moment. It was just the two of them and the land they loved, and the life they had built with determination and faith and love beyond measure. Just two hearts that had found each other against all odds and chosen to beat as one. I love you, Bennett said softly. I love you too, Victoria replied. And in that simple exchange, repeated countless times over 50-some years, was everything that mattered. Everything that had ever mattered. Two people who had witnessed each other's hearts and given their own in return, building a love story that would endure long after they were gone. The ranch they built still stands today, run by their descendants, a testament to what can be built when two people choose love over fear, forgiveness over bitterness, and partnership over isolation. The story of Bennett and Victoria Zane is still told in Reno, passed down through generations as an example of what real love looks like. Because in the end, their story was not about grand gestures or dramatic moments, though it had those too. It was about the everyday choice to see the best in each other, to forgive each other's flaws, to build something beautiful together day by day, year by year, lifetime by lifetime. Victoria forgave the man who stole from her, showing Bennett what true strength looked like. He witnessed her heart in that moment and knew he had found something worth giving everything for. So he gave her his own heart, completely and without reservation. And she took it, treasured it, and gave him hers in return. Together, they proved that love is not just about finding the right person, but about being the right person. About choosing kindness over cruelty, compassion over judgment, forgiveness over resentment. About building a life brick by brick, moment by moment, choice by choice. Their love story began with an act of mercy and grew into something extraordinary. It was tested by hardship and strengthened by perseverance. It was witnessed by their community and passed down to their children and grandchildren as a legacy more valuable than any material wealth. And when their time finally came to leave this earth, they went knowing they had lived well and loved completely, that they had built something that would outlast them both. Their bodies returned to the Nevada soil they had worked and loved, but their spirits lived on in the ranch they built, the family they raised, and the love story they created together. A love story that started with forgiveness and ended with forever, proving that the greatest adventures are not found in distant lands, but in the hearts we choose to cherish, the lives we choose to build, and the love we choose to give freely, generously, and without reservation. That was the legacy of Victoria and Bennett Zane, and it endures still, a light shining in the darkness, showing others the way home.